Beautiful human, hello and welcome. If you are here catching the replay, type in the chat box replay. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. My name is Natalie Biviano and I'm the founder of the marriagewhisperer.com, and I am so super excited to be here live doing my very ever first Ask a Coach live session, where I'm basically going to be answering a whole myriad of questions that have come through. Yesterday I asked on my page, what questions have you got for me as it relates to marriage? And my goodness, there were so many that came through. A really big shout out to you guys, those of you who are just so committed, invested and engaged in making marriage relationships work. It is such a testament to what really matters to you, right? So a really big shout out to those of you who submitted a question. They were such quality questions and I'm so really excited to just jump through them all. And so for the purpose of making it, I guess, succinct, and how do we have some sort of themes here, there was like over 20 questions that came through. Hey Safrina, great to see you here. And Fuja, my goodness, wow, beautiful to have you here. And so I guess the easiest way to go about answering the questions is to talk about them thematically. And as I kind of scan through and categorize the themes, there are about seven themes that really broke it down. So I'll speak to it in that sense. And oh my goodness, if you asked a question and if we don't get to it, I'm going to really see how we go. Some of the questions are going to require probably a little bit more depth, and some of them are a little bit just very straightforward, top line. Here's a simple answer. I guess the key takeaway here is, if you are here, beautiful Rach, great to see you. If you are here, really the lens in which I'd love for you to just view this, explore this and hear this is through value extraction is up to me. So when you are hearing something that might apply, does apply, really ask yourself, how does this apply to me? And then make it applicable. So I'm so stoked that you are here, and let us dive into it. We're going to really aim to keep it to the 30-minute mark. My goodness, there are so many questions. And obviously, if you're here catching this as a replay, if you can't stay on for that long, come back to this and watch it as a replay. Take a note of this timestamp and just come back to where you left off, because there's some really incredible questions here that I really want to share. Some ideas, thoughts, theories, and I guess some thinking behind it, some of the beliefs around these questions. And at the end of the day, we just want you to have really beautiful, connected relationships with our spouse. And if you're not currently in a relationship at the moment, consider how this can apply to yourself. How can you have this and cultivate this relationship with yourself and those who really matter to you? Because what else matters, right? When we go 6 foot under, we take nothing with us. We only hold on to the memories, and basically our timeline is all about relationships. And so that is why I do what it is that I do, because I'm always like, start with the end in mind. The end in mind is that we basically go 6 foot under and we take nothing with us. So how do we create, curate, and really live an intentional life that is full of deep, rich memories that matter? And so, great to see you here, Victor. I am kicking off, so some of the themes here. Okay, so there's deepening connection, handling evolving relationships, balancing responsibilities and priorities, managing differences in parenting styles, self-care and managing guilt, communication challenges, and marriage preparation. So overall, those were the themes that came through with the questions. Let us dive straight in. So Maria asked, what was the key that turned your most difficult moments into deeper connection? Oh my goodness, what a great question. The short answer to this is asking better questions. Asking better questions. I don't know if you guys have heard of the phrase, the quality of our lives is determined by the quality of the questions we asked. I know for me personally, right, what was the key that turned your most difficult moments into better connection or to deeper connection? When I asked better questions. I asked a lot of why questions. Why? Why are you doing that? Why can't you see it from my point of view? Why doesn't he treat me the way that he used to? Why? The wrong question to ask. Why carries judgment. Right? When we're asking the question why, it carries judgment. And what judgment does is that it creates distance. When we judge someone, it creates distance, and distance creates no intimacy. So remove asking why questions and instead ask either what, how, and who questions. So here's the number one question that changed the entire game for me. And this comes from Alison Armstrong. Alison Armstrong is a relationship expert who's been studying men for over 30 years. So here's what she says in terms of how you can ask higher quality questions that will change the entire deepening of your connection. Hear this question. What if he's responding to me? Or what if she's responding to me? So really acknowledging that there are a variety of people on this call and in this replay. Where are you at with that? What if my spouse is responding to me? Right? Why is this such a powerful question? Because it takes supreme ownership, accountability, and our ability to look at our own patterns. And when we ask with that, you end up with more agency in moving forward. Because when we're asking, why are you doing that? Why are you thinking this way? We're basically saying, how I respond is going to be dependent on this other person's response. And so when you ask, what if they're responding to me? Total game changer. So great question, Maria. Really appreciate it. So Naomi asks, what do you do if you're growing, evolving at a different rate to your partner? How do you stay connected as your values change? And this is a big question, right? This is a really big question. And a lot of people had kind of liked this comment, which really tells me that a lot of people resonate with this. And so essentially it's saying, if we're in partnership with someone and us being probably more the growth orientated, the one that's kind of addicted to personal development, the one that kind of just sits there and listens to all the podcasts and does all the courses and all the works, right? Oh my goodness, I'm growing and my partner's not, right? And so the question I'm hearing underneath that is that if we're growing, evolving at a different rate, how do you stay connected? And this is such a beautiful inquiry. And I guess there's a couple of trains of thoughts to that. Really big hello to all of you who are jumping on. Great to see your faces here. And so I'm just you can see me kind of veering straight back and forth. So thank you for your grace as I look back and forth. I really want to just refer to a couple of notes that I've made. And essentially, if we embody curiosity as these things occur, right? The growth, and it almost looks like, if you're looking, even just looking at the visibility of my hands, when one person's growing and perhaps one person's not, it almost seems like there's separation, or there's deviation, or there's a gap, or there's distance, right? So have curiosity about that gap. Have curiosity. This comes from the Gottman Institute. So John and Julie Gottman, who have up to 40 years of longitudinal data, they basically say this is inevitable, right? Growth happens, change happens, we evolve, we change. We're not the same people who we were when we were 20, nor will we be the same people when we are 50, right? And so how do we navigate that level of change is to stay curious, right? When you are curious about your growth, when you are curious about your partner's growth, and here's something that's also key, really, do our growth journeys have to look the same? And this is a personal struggle, not a personal struggle. Yes, own it, right? Has been a personal struggle, because in my mind, because my husband wasn't attuning to all the podcasts, because he wasn't listening to Deepak Chopra, because he wasn't reading all the books, there was like this judgment on my end saying, you're not growing, you're not growing. Remember, judgment creates distance, distance creates zero intimacy. When we have judgment, it's almost like there's this, you've got to do it my way. Growth looks like this, so you've got to do it this way. And so the premise is asking, please, can we have curiosity around this change? And Can we accept that growth looks differently, right? If you know that your partner's actually has evolved and not the same person, like they pretty much can't be, right, the same person. Maybe in some elements in your mind you're like, oh, they're still the same person. I bet you they're actually not, right? In small doses they have probably come with you on the journey, right? And here's the key: how do we invite versus how do we noose and drag, right? There's kind of a different energy to that. And so when we are inviting, when we are being inspiring, this energy then gives this, I guess, more like a pull energy to this person who is probably not growing, right? I feel like my answers are a little bit all over the place, but I trust that you are extracting what I'm sharing and imparting here. It's I guess the premise is being curious and respecting each other's journeys, individual journeys, respecting what that looks like. When we respect that person and how their growth looks, there is a semblance on their side to say, wow, this person just accepts me for who I am, right? When we accept people, this then inspires change. Because when we kind of blame, shame, criticize and say, you're not growing, you're not doing this, like there is no inspiration to that to grow. And so when we experience blame, shame, criticism, or judgment, there is this very innate primal need to shut down and defend ourselves because it feels like an attack, right? And so when we respect and accept our partner's growth journey, this is the playing field as to it will arise more, right? You will get more fertile soil, if you will, when you have acceptance and when you have respect for where your partner is at. And lastly, I guess another little pointer behind that: A, be curious; B, respect; and 3 is use this opportunity as an invitation to redefine, or in the words of Esther Perel, she invites couples to regularly renegotiate where we're at, right? So this just opens up beautiful dialogue. So visually, if it looks like I'm growing and my partner's not, what is this? This is distance, this is change, this is, oh my goodness, I'm moving further away, will they come with me? All these things, right? And so what if we looked at this and said, might this be an opportunity versus like, oh my goodness, what's happening? I'm fearing I'm losing connection, right? Two different schools of thought. One feels more fear-based and one feels more like curious and inquisitive. And how do we create a conversation to stay connected, right? And so this is this term of renegotiation. And so you could just invite the conversation. I'm really noticing that, you know, we're changing, and can we put forward this vision, right? This vision for ourselves and each other. And I really love this idea of vision. It comes from a mentor of mine. Her name's Michelle Leesenberry Christensen. She talks about when you're the person, and I imagine it's you, the one who submitted the question, the one who's here now live, the growth orientated one, when you really want and aspire to more, to bigger things, it's because you believe in the possibility of what is available to you, right? And so why don't you take on this role as the visionary for your relationship and put that forward to your spouse? And, you know, the conversation can sound like this in the renegotiation, right? It can sound something like, I really see this for us. I know that there's more for us. I really believe in us. I'm going down this path. I'd really love for you to really join me. And what might that look like, right? And it's just opening a lot of what, who, and how questions, not why, right? Remove why questions and engage conversation. So that's, I guess, speaking to that question. That was probably a little bit more in depth because I feel that was one where a lot of people had resonance with. So I hope that's been helpful. Okay, so Victor asks, what's the best way to overcome misaligned expectations? How do you approach the topic without getting defensive? How do you navigate? If you love me, you should already know. Victor, great question. There's a few layers here, and I'm going to kind of deconstruct this question by question, what's the best way to overcome misaligned expectations? So firstly, hear this, people, hear this. If there's anything you take away from this entire chat, and if you're watching the replay, if there's anything you take away these 3 words. Expectations ruin relationships. I'm going to say that again, just so that you really hear it. Expectations ruin relationships. So we need to eliminate, remove expectations, and instead we need to replace them with raising our personal standards. So that would be the first piece, right? Remove expectations. And that really falls into the whole, well, if you love me, you should already know, right? I expect you to know. And so if this is your spouse saying it to you, well, I expect you to know. How is it possible that after 20 years, you're still asking me the same thing? You should just know. It's really infuriating, right? Because it's a really lousy expectation. That's the assumption that people go around thinking that other people are mind readers. So for those of you who are in this boat and either think it yourself, if you're thinking, oh my gosh, why are they asking me? They should just know, especially, and I hear this frequently, right? Those who are in long-term relationships. 20 years we've been together and he should just know, she should just know. Expectations ruin relationships. Our spouse is not a mind reader. Things chop and change. Sometimes my go-to is like, oh, I love pho, I love Mexican food, I love Italian, but and then some days I might just completely change my mind. I feel like fish and chips. Like that, you can't assume and expect that that's what that person is going to choose, right? That was a really low stakes example, but sometimes we just chop and change for the day, for the hour, for the moment. We can't assume. And so if your spouse is saying this to you, you should just know, here's how you would navigate that. You would have the conversation very neutrally. And I heard this word in this question. How do you approach the topic without getting defensive? Defensive means we're kind of putting our armor up, which means there's a shield. And the reason why we need to defend is because we're feeling attacked. And so how do you do that without feeling defensive? Notice, right? If you can put your armor down and know that it's not personal, maybe know that it's just like, oh, we just have a communication inadequacy and we just can't communicate well. Notice if you can receive the you should just know without getting defensive. Notice that it's probably not personal. So if you're on the receiving end and feeling defensive, just, I guess, put that armor down and say, let's just not take it personal. And you could say something like, it's not fair that you would think I'm a mind reader because I'm not. So I'm going to have to ask you to let me know what it is that you need. And so this opens up just neutral dialogue, right? So it's, when the defenses come, the attack comes. When you're not getting an answer, one shuts down, one keeps pursuing, and it just goes round and round in circles, right? So who breaks that pattern, right? The person who's kind of here, getting the insight, knowing how to, drop the armor and open up the dialogue so that it becomes neutral. How do we neutralize it? We just don't take it personally. Oh my gosh, there's so much more that I could say to this, but for the purpose of how do we just keep this really top line and practical, I hope that this is helpful. Okay, Shondell asks, what if you're doing the work and appreciating your partner, but they default to old patterns and don't give you the benefit of the doubt? And so underneath that, what I'm hearing is there feels like perhaps there's like separation happening, like one person's kind of changing, growing, evolving, doing their thing, and the other person's kind of going, hang on, what is going on with that pattern? And they're just basically trying to reel them back in. I'm trying to not change with them because I'm comfortable in my change, right? No one likes change. Change is uncomfortable, human nature, right? And so the question is that Shondell's asking, what if you are doing the work and they're trying to pull you back in? Stick to your guns. And I think it's important to have the conversation about noticing that they've changed too. And so, Sean, because you and I work together, I know that there have been examples where you've said, oh my goodness, he has changed. He's actually apologized. He's never apologized before. So it's these small things that maybe perhaps he's forgotten that he's changed too. And then so it's about having this really transparent, neutral conversation to say, yes, perhaps it feels like things are changing between us and I'm doing the work, I'm cleaning up my side of the street. Notice, darling, that in this circumstance, and have maybe 2 or 3 examples where you know that you've changed, where you know that you've responded differently, where you know that you've shown thoughtfulness to your spouse and perhaps they just haven't seen it yet. So when we make it really explicit and highlight it, maybe that's what they need to see, because perhaps in their view and their filter and their lens, it's skewed, distorted, and they're just projecting maybe just some internal frustrations. Again, don't take it personally. Maybe they've just had a really lousy day at work. Isn't it an excuse to be a punching bag for someone? No, it's not. And also notice that as humans, I'm sure that we've all done it too, right? Just kind of taking it out on our spouse. Notice that essentially he's just saying, I feel us moving apart and I'm scared to lose you. And so how do we just bring that conversation back? We neutralize it and we acknowledge that that's what they're saying. And then we highlight to them, actually, I am changing for the better for me, for us. Really invite them in to this place of being that visionary. Okay, so, great question from Pooja. She asked, how do you keep the chemistry alive in your marriage? Okay. Chemistry alive, especially if you're in a long-term relationship where things can start to become very monotonous, stagnant, and just start to go ho-hum and you just start to accept the mediocre. How do you keep the chemistry alive? So I want you to imagine this. I want you to picture like a science experiment, like as if it was a chemistry subject, right? And so let's just say you've got a glass of Coke and it's lost its fizz. There's no more, sparkle, and it's flat. What do you do to create that fizz? What do you do to create that new re-energized movement in this stale, stagnant, bubbleless glass of Coke? I don't know. Throw in some ideas. Help me with this. I want you to get thinking as to picturing what is stagnant, what is stale. Even a pond, a pond that hasn't been moved and becomes stale, and then algae grows in a stale situation. What do you do in those moments, right? You would, I don't know, what comes to mind? Like I would throw a Mentos in there, or maybe even an ice cube in there just to create chemistry, right? You've got to polarize the environment. You've got to move and start moving things around. And so if you think about, I know this is probably a lame example, but I trust that you're with me here. Thank you. You're saying, yep, it's a good example. So the premise here is to find polarity. Find the opposite, right? So Esther Perel talks about in our relationships, we need an element of surprise. We need an element of mystery. This is part of human nature, right? We like certainty. We like things to be stable, secure, and predictable. Then we also like spontaneity, adventure, mystery, surprise. Like these are our human needs. And so when we start to see so much of the same thing, it's monotonous, it's predictable, it's the same old, same conversation, same routine, I need a little bit of variety. I need a little bit of mystery. I need a little bit of just let me throw in a Mentos in this stale Coke. What happens, right? New things arise. So polarity is the key here. Find something that's going to polarize. And so this concept is all about how do we enter into different energies, right? Masculine and feminine energies. And so the key is find polarity. Do something to disrupt the the stagnancy. That's what creates chemistry, right? That's what creates that initial poof, whiz, gets things going again. And you can create chemistry on kind of like a bigger scale or even like little tiny micro doses, right? Chemistry in the kitchen can look like a little mini butt tap, right? It could look like a tiny wink to each other at the dinner table, like really mundane, monotonous, repetitive, daily things that we do. We eat at the table together. We say, hey, how was your day? Like just, that's the boring stuff, quote unquote. But this is like life, right? Life's pretty monotonous. So how do we find moments, like little micro moments to create pops of chemistry? This is what keeps things alive, and really revering our marriage as something that is like a living organism, right? When something is living, when something is alive, imagine your marriage is this item. Do you guys remember once upon a time there was like these Tamagotchi games where you had to feed it, like, I don't know, your younger siblings, or maybe you've got, I don't even know the era, but basically, you know, those games where you had to like feed it, you had to care for it, you had to attend to it, otherwise it would die, dehydrate, or just, I don't know. And so it's almost like, how do you imagine that your marriage is, I think it's so lame to call it a Tamagotchi game, but it is a living organism, right? That needs to be revered, that needs to be respected, that needs to be put on a mantelpiece, like the marriage. I'm not saying Natalie, I'm not saying Robert, but Robert and Natalie has a marriage which is separate. Like it's almost like a third party. We have to revere it. How do we pour into it? How do we feed it, right? It's these tiny things that we do on a daily level that keep the chemistry alive. Okay. Where are we at? Oh my goodness. It's like, I'm so, okay. Balancing responsibilities and priorities. That was kind of the next kind of category. And a question that Chrissy Charlton had, she said, how to overcome comparisons of who does what if the man and the mum stays home and also has to be working. How do you have healthy, balanced parenting responsibilities so it doesn't fall on one? Ah, my goodness, really big and great question, Christy. I love it so much. Let's break this down. Okay. How to overcome comparisons is the question that Christy asks. So if you are in comparison mode, well, he does this and I do this, and well, let me get that scorecard out. There's 17 items that I do and he does 4. Fair much? No, not really. And so when we keep score, when it becomes tit for tat, when it becomes, I've done this, you done that, and it you can see where this is going, right? It becomes very competitor. Right, and when we are in competitorship in a partnership, like it doesn't work. It just does not work. We will try and one up each other. And sometimes competitorship can look like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. And you're like, oh, you reckon you're tired? Well, let me tell you about my day. And so it's like, who's had the more harder day, right? This is competitorship. This is dangerous territory, right? So when we start comparing, it kind of then leads us into becoming competitors, which is almost like the breeding ground for resentment to occur. When resentment starts to kick in, you can be rest assured that this is absolutely going to kill all intimacy, right? The distance will just get further and further away. So if you start to notice, I'm comparing, I'm doing tit for tat, I'm doing scorekeeping, like they're just no, don't do that. It's a really lousy habit to put in place. So the question becomes, how do you overcome it, right? How do you make it feel fair? And this is such a great question. And without knowing too much detail, I'm going to speak to this on a really top level. So I guess big picture, play to your strengths is my biggest advice. Play to your strengths. And it could be as simple as kind of starting big picture, right? Go, who takes care of outside, who takes care of inside? It can start from there, and then we can make our way through and then look at the weighting of what looks fair. And notice, fair's never going to be 50-50. Oh my goodness. Let me tell you, right? When the gutters are leaking, we've had lots of rain in the last couple of days on the Gold Coast. When things are dripping, I can tell you that is not my job. I can tell you that is not, I don't attend to those things, right? This is not my strength. This is my husband's strength. And sometimes he might be attending to this thing for hours and hours and hours, right? He's got to source where the problem is, locate it, then head off to Bunnings to get some tools right? And so there's a lot of labor and cognitive, mental load, all the things involved in this tasking. And so if you think about, well, what is fair? oh my God, this is such a big topic. How do you take a step back and really see your household as departments? And there's the department of the finances. Even if you think of an organization, right? There's the finance department, there's a sales department, there's an operations department, there's a human resources, there's a marketing department, there's different departments, right? In a household, we have the financial department. We need money coming in to, pay bills, put a roof over our head. And in this question that Christy's asking, she's assuming that the man is the breadwinner, the provider, the financial supplier of that department. And then the woman's role, she's also working too. So she contributes also, and she's also doing the parenting roles, such as domesticity, so the emotional department of a household, the mental department of a household. Again, I'm going to invite you to consider, what are your strengths around this? How do we start to subdivide and welcome conversations that relate to what feels fair, right? There's a book called Fair Play by Eve Rodsky, and it's really powerful. So maybe something like that could be helpful for your household. If this is something that feels like you are carrying the entire weight of parenting responsibilities, this becomes a conversation with your spouse if they aren't, I guess, holding up their end of the parenting responsibilities. Because yes, now modern day, both of us are working outside of the home to bring in the finances, and we're both in the department of managing finances or bringing in finances. And then so really it becomes this conversation of, where are our household values and what matters to us now in this season, right? In this season. And this is where it gets tricky, because the circumstances are, in modern life now, we are operating so hyper independent as family units. We are moving further away from village. We lack support from the wider community. So it becomes the mother and the father doing all the things, and then also doing all the parenting as well. Oh my God, this is such a big conversation. So it really has to be a conversation around, this feels heavy, I can't do this alone. Here's where I'm going to need your support, your help. And I feel like when we look at these conversations that relate to equality and equity, it is never going to be a 50-50 split. There are some days where I'm carrying a load that feels like 20 bricks. And there are some days that my husband will carry a load that feels like, 50 bricks. And what's more fair? I'm a smaller frame, he's a bigger frame, he can carry the bigger load. Oh my God, this is such a big question. I think where I can kind of land this plane with this particular conversation is when we have a high level of appreciation of wearing each other's shoes and really understanding where the other person comes from and their primary role in the household. So in our household, my husband is the financial provider. He is the primary breadwinner. And sometimes it's like, I need your help more at home, and his time is all the way here doing the things he has to do to put a roof over our head, right? And so I will really empathize with that role. How do I do that? I literally go to his workplace. I literally put on my steel cap boots and emulate his life, so I can really understand where he's coming from. So I can really understand the fairness in what I'm asking him to do, right? And so when I see him doing what he does, and he is in very physical work and he's attending to different phone calls and people are ringing him and he has to move this car and move, there's a lot going on, and you don't appreciate what they go through until you were there in it, right? Immerse yourself in their world somehow. That would be my biggest advice. And vice versa. Does he know how challenging it is to carry the mental and emotional load? And this is where we have to have these conversations where you ask for support, not permission. Ask for what is it you need, because we are all worthy of rest. And so when I need to go away, right, I need to do things to get time out, And I would have trips, solo trips, interstate. And so Rob would carry the fort with school pickup. He'd have to shut the shop. He'd have to get the kids. He'd have to get dinner sorted. He'd have do all the things that I would normally take care of. And here's the power in inviting each other into each other's worlds, right? In a way that's inviting, right? Not in a forceful way. So notice the difference. And when he does that, he really gets an appreciation of what goes on in my world too. And so when we can see each other's worlds and feel what we go through, there is higher levels of understanding. And he then knows to, I guess, make my life easier. He just knows to do that now, right? Because when I'm attending to the kids, and especially when they were younger and you're picking them up, and then like if you didn't have food ready and just like yogurt's all over the car, just stuff like that, right? And he would see how chaotic that feels and how to manage that level of stress when things are just so out of your control. You are just, responding to the chaos that is with managing small humans. And so when he could really see that, he now knows to ring me and say, what can I pick up for dinner? What can I pick up for on the road? Do you need anything, right? So it wasn't until he immersed himself in my life to really know that. So my what I want to impart to you is, how do you create a conversation that invites an exchange of understanding each other's lives? So that was a big one. That was a big one because it's a big question, and without really knowing, I guess, immediate circumstances, it's hard to kind of customize it. So I trust that you've taken away something that's valuable for you here. Okay. Let's move on to a couple of questions. One comes from Ellie, one comes from Patsy, and essentially it's all about, how do you prioritize quality time together amidst busy schedules? The short answer is this. Stephen Covey has this incredible saying. He's the author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, book that changed my life. Please read it if you haven't. But he says this: don't prioritize your schedule. Schedule your priorities. And this is a really powerful way of making our spouse the priority. And just notice that when we are in amongst a lot of different activities, wearing different hats, attending to building our business, attending to looking after grandchildren. This came through from Patsy. She said, and you're also working full time. Then how do you prioritize your partner so that they don't feel like last on the list? Put them first on the list in the sense of, you matter to me, right? So have this conversation with them that says, darling, right now I'm in a season where there's a lot of activity going on, and I'm growing this, I'm doing this, and this also matters to me to be with my grandchildren. And I also cherish our connection. And so I want to know what is going to make you feel like you're a priority in amidst all this movement that's going on for me. What can I do for you first thing in the morning that makes you feel like you're a priority? So when you elicit from them what's important to them, then you can see how you can make that a priority. And notice, right, it doesn't have to take an hour, right? It can be quite literally 1 minute. And let me give you a small example, right? The first thing, how do you prioritize each other? How do you know that you are each other's priority no matter what is going on? My husband's day is chock-a-block. There's constantly phone calls, clients, he's got a slew of messages all the time. And sometimes I'm like, where do I fit in that priority list, right? And for me personally, I'm like, I feel that's my wound, that's my scar, that's my ouchie, that hurts when I'm not a priority in his life, right? And so we found ways so that I feel like a priority in his life. And here's a tiny little small hack in how we kind of do that, right? So take what you will from this. Every morning when he leaves super early, he makes sure that he kisses me every single day in the morning. And before, he never used to do that because he was like, I don't want to wake her. So his intention is, I don't want to wake her. And my receptivity of that was like, oh my God, he doesn't care. I'm not a priority. So notice just the single act of not doing something can be perceived in different worldviews. And so we had a really robust conversation around this, around how important it was to me to feel like a priority. So it takes a minute. He comes to me and we have a beautiful morning exchange, kisses my forehead, and he tells me that, the sweet whisperings that, always make my day. And that's it. It takes less than 30 seconds, right? Those are the days where he's got super long days and he leaves early. And so it's these small, tiny things that demonstrate to know that we are priority, right? And so if you are with items that require time, what are some small ways to demonstrate to your spouse that they are a priority? Knowing their love language is very helpful. And so you can either send them a text message, which takes virtually no time. You could even pre-plan and put in drafts, press send. It could just literally say, hi, thinking of you. It takes less than 10 seconds to send that. And because they receive it, especially if their love language is words of affirmation, they will feel like a priority. They will feel like, oh my goodness, I still matter to this person in amongst all that's happening. And so it's prioritizing and scheduling in your priorities. That's such a powerful quote. Don't prioritize your schedule your priorities. Make sure it's the first thing you do. Okay. Woo! We have been on here for 40 minutes. Oh my gosh. And Victor, Lauren, and Rach, I see you. Those who are here catching the replay, type in the chat box replay so I know that you've been here, and type in any key landings that you've had so far so that I know what's been helpful and if there's any questions. So you have to excuse me, I've just been going diving away, so I haven't really been paying attention to the comments. I'll get to it after I get off this video. But for the purpose of moving forward, I can probably go up until the next maybe 10 minutes, and then we'll do a part 2 of this. So if your question hasn't been answered, come along to the next video where I'll answer some more questions. Okay, so the next theme were questions around managing different parenting styles and energies. So Miranda asks, what's the best way to work through different parenting methods? The best way to work through different parenting methods is A, respect each other's worldviews. Come to this conversation with a respect for each other's worldviews. Noticing that we have different parenting styles simply because we were raised in different environments, brought up in different households with different values, with different cultural expectations, with different, just everything's been different, right? And so when we try and navigate these different worlds into building our new world, notice that when we respect each other's worldviews, this is going to take you miles ahead. Having a conversation around what worked for you and what worked for me, let's take the best of both worlds and bring it forward to curate a new world. Otherwise, underneath what can happen here is basically when we don't respect each other's worldviews, it's basically saying, my way is better. You must do parenting my way. So the undertone or the subtext to that is to say, my way is better, do it my way. So it's essentially a conversation about control, right? And so if you go a little step underneath this, and I hope this is going to be really helpful for you to hear, it's actually not about the parenting styles. It's actually not about why are you always leaving socks at the door. The hamper is 1 meter away. It's never about the socks. It's never about the parenting styles. It's never about who does the more dishes, right? Underneath every surface level conflict or disagreement, there's really 3 themes, and I want to share them with you here very quickly so you can identify what's really going underneath, right? When you can see what's going on underneath, then you can have really like a proper conversation about what it's really about. Let me share those 3 things. It is usually about power and control. Whose needs matter more here, right? Whose decisions are more important here? Who's not being recognized, right? It's power and control, respect and recognition. Do you even value what it is that I have to say here? Am I even part of the equation in this household? Are my thoughts of any significance here? All right, power and control, respect and recognition, and the last one is trust and closeness. It is a matter of, are we even in this together? Do you have my back? Right? It's one of these three things that's really going on underneath, right? And so when you can identify which one of these feel most true, then you're going to have a real conversation about what it's about. It's actually not about the parenting styles. It's like, I'm noticing that when we disagree with these things, it makes me lose respect for you, because it feels like my inputs aren't even important to you. And so we're not even talking about the socks. We're not even talking about the parenting styles. We're talking about power and control, respect and recognition, trust and closeness. So when you can identify which one of these three things, then you can have a real conversation. So I trust that's been helpful. This work has come from the greats, right? I've been studying the experts who've been doing this for over 40, 50 years. And when you've seen enough of the patterns, they can look at items and distill it and really synthesize where the real problems lie. When you can get to the root of the real problems, then you can make significant change in your relationship. So next question comes from Nicholas. He says, I feel that I never loved my wife enough. What can I do about it? What a great question, Nick. So ask yourself this: what do you hear her complain about the most? If she was to complain about something, what would that be? Because complaints are unmet needs. And so, for example, if you hear her complain about, oh my God, I'm so tired. Oh gosh, I have to do the dishes now. Oh my gosh, the kids, they're just driving me crazy with bedtime. Like, what is she complaining about? Notice a complaint is an unmet need. And so the way that you can show her more love is to ask her how you can meet those unmet needs. Is to say to her, sweetheart, it sounds like you're feeling really tired right now. How can I make your day easier? Or taking the initiative, and just, if you know her really well, again, we can't assume, but you can always take leadership and take the initiative to pinpoint what her unmet need is, and then to come through with the goods on that. So if you can speak to her love language, maybe it's buying her a tiny piece of chocolate next time you go to the service station and fill up your car. Baby, I was thinking of you. What if it was that? What if she was just like, I don't feel like he ever thinks of me, right? And people speak in different dialects and currencies as to what really speaks to them. And so if you haven't read The 5 Love Languages, please do so. It's a game changer, and really, yes, people have read it, done the quiz, really apply the depth of how this really speaks to our spouse, when we can really speak to what matters to them. And so that's my response to that question. Okay. Oh my goodness. There are a range of questions here that fall under that category of different energies and styles. Okay, Bree has a question about how to keep your partner updated with a family schedule when you manage everything without feeling like you're nagging. Okay, so my question around that, Bree, great question. I would be asking, what are the agreements around capacity? What agreements have been put in place around capacity? So if, let's just say, how well attuned, how engaged, how much bandwidth, how much capacity does your husband, has he agreed to in terms of the family? Yes, this is absolutely where I want to be. I want to hear about everything. Keep me updated. That type, like, what is his, I guess, what is the agreement around what he needs to be involved in? Or is there just an assumption on your end he needs to be involved in everything? So perhaps that's where the disconnect is, and that's where I'm hearing you're saying, how can I do this without the nagging? And so I will get really clear on the agreements first on what family schedule and family time looks like. And what comes to mind on a very top level, I'm sure we can hash this out a little bit further in one of our coaching calls, is how can you automate perhaps some reminders in a shared Google Calendar. I know there was this beautiful suggestion about having a really big whiteboard, and this is our schedule for the week. And so here's, highlight, these are the important things like, ceremonies and assemblies and sports accolades, whatever. And then obviously this is where we get to choose what is a priority, right? This is where we get to see how we can be involved in our children's lives. This is where we can be attuned to what really matters. And when we know and have that awareness and agreement of, yes, this is what matters to the child, and of course, involve the child depending on how old they are, it's really important that you come along to this. And then when the child has communicated, yes, I would love you to come along, that's when dad knows to be there. That's when dad makes arrangements at work. That's when dad gets uncomfortable and asks for what he needs to accommodate what his family priorities are. So this is a big question as well. So from a very top level, I would explore what has been agreed in terms of commitments of the family schedule. Okay, I am going to wrap it up with one final question in this live, and then I'm going to continue this because there are so many more questions to be answered in the categories of self-care and managing guilt, in communication challenges and marriage mindsets. There are so many great questions. I'm going to do it in a part 2. So if you're here watching this now, I hope you are extracting what has been helpful for you. Come back and watch part 2. I'm going to wrap this one up now with this one final question from Natasha, who says, how do you navigate different energy levels when one partner is more excited or enthused about doing something than the other? I think I already alluded to this earlier in one of the other questions, is there has to be acceptance and respect of each other's worldviews. And also knowing that our level of expression may differ, right? Like expressions on a spectrum of how do you illustrate and highlight excitement? Like for some people, I don't know, maybe me, like excitement is like animated. I beam up, I smile. It feels like I'm doing like 80 cartwheels. For me, that is like an excitement. And so for me, that's like a 10 excitement, how someone would see that, right? And say for someone like my husband, who is very introverted, very so not Natalie, right? Tell me more about how opposites attract, right? And his level of a 10 excitement could be like, yeah, that's cool. I'm looking forward to it. Like that's his version of a 10. Like that's his representation of an excitement 10, right? And how do you accept that? How do you respect that? How do you recognize that this is who they are and this is how they express and emote? And so perhaps, and this is again making assumptions because you're not here to kind of clarify the conversation, Tash, navigating different energy levels, is there perhaps an expectation that it needs to match mine, right? And do it my way. And what are you making that mean? Like if their expectation, if their energy levels aren't in par, like what are you making that mean? That, I don't know, that their interest and engagement and connection to you is less? Like really have a think about like what are you making their energy levels mean? That's going to be a really powerful question for you to inquire and ask. And so on that note, a really, really big thank you for those of you who are here. Verity, hello, great to see you here. I'm gonna end part 1 here now. We've spoken about the themes of managing different parenting styles, balancing responsibilities and priorities, deepening connection and handling evolving relationships. So that's what we covered in this Q&A, Ask a Coach Live. In the next part, I'm going to carry through and answer the following questions. And so I hope you can join me for that. I'm going to find a pocket of time either later today or tomorrow where we can go through those questions. Really big thank you for those of you who are here. I'd love for you to type in the chat box what has been the biggest key takeaway, what has really landed for you. Please feel free to type in the chat box or send me a DM. Send me a DM if there's anything you want any further clarification on. Let's jive, let's tease it out. I'm here to support you. I'm here to help you have better relationships, because what else matters? Nothing. Nothing matters. And so when we just do a tiny little tweak, right? Yes, we've spoken a lot here. I imagine you've taken away one or two key things. Do those one or two things, because it's these small, tiny things that make the big difference. Thank you for being here. Lauren, big love to you. And so I'm going to keep you updated when I'm going to do part 2. But for now, so much love. And it's the small things, my friends. It's the small things. All right, take care, and I'll see you in part 2.